Welcome to Web Developer 2016. In this course we learn how to make websites starting from zero, going all the way until the end, where we pretty much can make any website that we can think of. And in this course we will always be starting at an overview level and then go down into detail in hope that it prevents us from ever getting lost, and in case we should get somewhen overwhelmed, we can always zoom out to that overview level and then we always know where we are, and in hope that we always can grasp the sense behind what we are actually doing. One administrative comment to this course: the materials such as the slides, the notes, etc., they can be downloaded from the website w3vid.com, and those notes, etc., are always attached to each video. And this is week number 1, in which we first of course gain an overview on the entire course, in which we discuss what a web developer actually does and why he or she is doing these things. And we will see that a web developer is writing code in different languages, because a website is just code and nothing else. It's always the browser, our window that we have here, that is able to read the code and then it can display the website. But every website is just code, nothing else, that is read by the browser, and the browser then makes a beautiful website out of that code. And this is therefore going to be our job. We will be writing code, and not only in one language, but in several languages. And in this week, we take a look what each of these languages do, what each of them is in charge of. So this will be our job. But before we go into our job, let's have a look why we are actually writing code. And the answer will be given by the internet and the World Wide Web, because that will be our playground. That's our picture that we are working on. It's our overview, most top overview. And we will see that the internet, as well as the World Wide Web, is the communication between computers. And one computer may be at a complete different location than the other one. Nevertheless, those computers could still communicate images, voice, videos, text in general. And we will take a look therefore in part number 2 how this is possible. At least we want to get a feeling towards it, because data communication, it's its entire own course. It's a large topic. So all we want here in the second part on data communication, we want a feeling how this is possible. And then ultimately part number 3 will be our actual job. What we are doing before is why we are doing these things. And then finally we will go into the download and the installation of some necessary software in order that next week we can immediately start coding, making websites. Let's kick off with part number 1, the internet and the World Wide Web. That's our big image that we are working in, our playground. And the World Wide Web was invented in 1989 by Tim Berners-Lee. In order for him to do so, though, he needed 2 pre-inventions to have already been out there, and one of which was the internet. And the internet is the communication between computers. And those computers can be at any location around this earth, and they are not directly connected to each other, because before the internet was there, which came out in the 70s, this possibility was already there that people could connect each other with a direct cable and then they could communicate with each other. So the internet is using the infrastructure that is already out there without connecting each computers directly. So for example, the infrastructure such as cables from telephone companies, for example. So if this computer wants to send something to that one, it uses the cable, for example. Let's stick with cables, cable from company A, and then another one from company B, company C, D, E, and ultimately reaching the destination where this message shall go to. And messages that are sent are always divided up into individual parts. So one message part may go this way, another one may go another way, using the infrastructure from other companies, company A, B, C, D, and ultimately also reaching the destination. And here the messages are reassembled together, ultimately giving the original message to that person that is sitting here. So this is the internet in general. To keep it simple, let us just say the internet is the communication between computers that are completely unrelated to each other and not connected to each other. And that was precondition number 1 that Tim Berners-Lee needed in order to invent the World Wide Web. And now comes precondition number 2, pre-invention. So the idea and the products of hypertext. The first products came out in the 60s. And what is hypertext? It's clicking on some text or on something on the screen, and then we are jumping somewhere else. So in the World Wide Web, so when we visit a website, this is what we are doing the entire time. We are clicking somewhere, jumping somewhere else to a subpage of the website or to a completely different website. And here we see in the 60s the first products came out, such as this stick here. And when a person used this stick to point on some text on the screen, it would, for example, jump to a sub-article of this text. The first mouse came also out in the 60s. And what we are doing nowadays to jump around, we are using the mouse or our finger if we are using a touchscreen device. So these two inventions were the basis for Tim Berners-Lee to invent the World Wide Web, which he then did so in 1989. And the World Wide Web is the communication between computers, same as the internet. But it is a subcategory of the internet. Because in the World Wide Web, these computers that are communicating, they fulfill a certain purpose. One party is needing something and the other party is having something. One party is needing the code, because every website is just code, and the one party is the web browser. So this is us, for example. That person right here is us. We have the web browser, and whenever we enter an address and hit enter, then we want that code from that certain website. For example, website abc.com, for example. And that code may be accidentally located in Eastern Russia. So we are contacting, as soon as we hit enter, then after having entered the address, we are contacting this computer, hey, give me the code. Then the code comes back. Our web browser can then read that code, and then it can display the website. And maybe on that website is a link to a complete different website, maybe website xyz.com. And the code for that website is, for example, located in Australia. So once we click that link, we are jumping then to that computer, hey, give me the code. Code comes back, our browser reads the code, and then displays the website xyz.com. So this is a combination here. It's still the communication between computers, but both are fulfilling a certain purpose, and it's the idea of hypertext, jumping always to another computer. That one has the code for that website, the other one has the code for that website, and a third one the code for a third website. This is the World Wide Web, the major part of the internet. In general, the internet is the communication between computers, and the World Wide Web, the communication between specific computers. Now let's go into further examples. But before, let's take a look at some stats. So right now, the World Wide Web started booming then in the 90s, so it took a little bit until it took off. And nowadays, we have something like 1 billion websites that we can access with our web browser, meaning 1 billion names that we can enter here, and then we hit enter, and then we get that code for that certain website, and then our browser can read that code. And in terms of users, this is a little bit outdated data here, but we are marching towards half the population, something like above 3 billion people are nowadays connected to the World Wide Web or to the internet. And now let's go for a real example with a real website. And let's take the website Youku.com, which is the Chinese alternative for YouTube. So it's a video website as well. And the people who own that website, they decided to upload the code, because every website is just code. So they decided to upload that code to a computer that is located in Beijing in China. And that is each of us. So wherever we are located, and whenever we enter the website name Youku.com and then hit enter, and then the wheel starts to turn. And this is exactly the moment that this communication is then going on with the other computer. So let me assume that I'm this guy in Central Africa right now. I entered the address youku.com, and as soon as I hit enter, I'm contacting this computer in Beijing. Hey, give me the code. Code comes back. My browser reads the code, and then, and only then, it can display the website. And everything happens very, very fast, because this communication is basically at the speed of light, as we will see in the second part of this video of this week. And this communication is actually not only going on once. In actual fact, as soon as we hit enter, it's asking, hey, are you there? Yes, I'm there. Then give me the code. Code comes back, but not the entire code. Some other code comes back later. Images and videos are coming back separately, each of them separately as well. So this communication is going on multiple times, making it even more extraordinary how quick, how fast everything goes. So on the one hand, always we have the web browser that needs the code. And on the other hand, we have that computer ultimately that has the code and it can hand it out. So these computers, or all these computers that have the code, they are providing a service. They hand out the code whenever they get requested to. And this is why the software that is installed on such computers is referred to as web server software, because it provides a service for the web. And this service ultimately will be used by the web browsers to display the websites. Now this web server software is not the only thing, but pretty much the only thing installed on these computers, because the only purpose, or the purpose that these computers that have the code, they shall fulfill the purpose of handing out this code. So nevertheless, it's a regular computer, but because of the purpose, that the only purpose that it shall have of handing out this code, this is why we wouldn't attach a screen on this computer, because we wouldn't install any game or anything else on it where we would require any screen. Nevertheless, it's a regular computer, and because of the purpose that it provides, the entire computer gets referred to as web server, even though it's actually just the software that is installed on that computer that provides this service, this web server software. Therefore, the communication is always between web browsers and web servers. That's the World Wide Web. One party needs the code, the other party has the code. Let us do one more example with the IMDb website. So as soon as the wheel has stopped turning here, the entire process is done. Let's go for IMDb. That website is a movie website, which we most likely know, or some of us at least. And the people, or the company that owns this website is Amazon. And Amazon has its headquarters in Seattle. And this is just where they decided then to upload the code, where then we, with our browsers, we can then access this code, can retrieve it from Seattle, from that web server. So it's always up to the people where the code ultimately will be, up to the people who own the website. So as soon as I hit enter, wheel starts to turn. Let me now assume I'm this guy in South America here. I'm contacting this computer now. Hey, give me the code. Code comes back. My browser reads the code and then displays the website. And this not only happens, of course, whenever we enter an address, but also when we click a link, for example, on the website, same thing. Wheel starts to turn. Hey, give me the code. Code comes back. And the code that I requested now is not the code for the homepage, imdb.com, but the code for imdb.com/title/ etc., etc. This is therefore the World Wide Web, and now we are going into data communication. The World Wide Web will be our playground, and let's take a look now a little bit on data communication, at least get a feeling towards how this is possible. How can something like text, images, videos that we find on a website, how can that be communicated? And voice as well. And let's go back a little bit into history, to the year 1800, where a person named Volta invented a device that we nowadays better know as battery. And what does a battery do? It provides a continuous flow of electric current. Meaning, since that day, since the battery was invented, people could experiment around with electric current continuously, because now it was continuously there with that device, the battery. Now people already knew before that some materials conduct electric current very well and others don't. And one that does conduct electric current very well, meaning if we put electric current here, it will automatically be traveling along this material. And one material that does this very well is copper wire. And people came up then with a device in the 1830s that looks like this, and this device is connected to a battery, meaning there is a continuous flow of electric current, but this electric current is blocked. And whenever this handlebar gets pushed down, then the electric current from that battery gets released onto the wire. And then this copper wire conducts this electric current to the other end, and then people came up also with a device on the other end that made noises whenever electric current was coming through. And then there could be, and there was, a person listening to these noises, and that person always knew then when electric current was coming through and when it did not. Now electric current can only be there or it can not be there. But we can make up a code with the other person. We can agree with that person. So let's assume we are this one. We are this person here. We are in charge of pushing down this handlebar, meaning we are in charge when electric current will be put onto the wire. And we agree with that person up on a code. For example, let me indicate when electric current comes through, that is represented by this dot. So when electric current comes through and then it doesn't, and then it comes through again, and then it doesn't, and then it comes through again, then this ultimately shall represent, for example, the letter O. So we just need to agree with the other person. And then let's also agree with the other person that when electric current is coming through a little bit longer, and then it doesn't, and then it comes through a little bit longer, and then it doesn't, and then again a little bit longer electric current is coming through, then let that be the letter S, for example. So in terms of the letter O, for example, what we need to do, we are in charge of pushing down this handlebar. So we need to quickly push down, release again, push down, release, push down again very quickly. So ultimately then this format of electric current is sent through. On the other end, that machine is making the noise dit, 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 and that person listening to it, knowing that this represents the letter O, this person therefore then knows, the letter O was coming through, and therefore we see here now that we can really communicate any character that we can think of. Characters are letters, numbers, symbols. To combine that all under a common hood, characters. Let's consider them as characters. So each character we can communicate. We just need to make up a code and of course need to agree with the other end up on that code. So the other end would always know what we mean whenever we send electric current through the wire. So this device that was invented actually at two different locations at the same time in the 1830s in the US and in Great Britain. This device is better known as the telegraph, and this telegraph started mass communication on this earth. After a couple of further developments in this area, people then started laying cables all over the world, connecting the continents, so laying cables in the ocean, connecting one land to the other, and therefore the entire world started or could then communicate with each other. And later there was not a device that was required to be pushed down, a handlebar that needed to be pushed down to release electric current onto the wire. Later there was an actual keyboard, such as we know a keyboard nowadays. So that person here only needed to press, for example, the letter S on the keyboard, and that would have automatically then released the electric current for the letter S onto the wire. And on the other end, there was not a device making noises anymore. Instead, there was then actually a printer printing exactly then that letter that was coming through, that character, because that printer knew the electric current formats for all these letters. So for example, for the letter S, and then it was printing the letter S directly onto a paper. So this is how things developed over the years. And now let us jump into an actual code that is used nowadays. And I just used always dots or dashes to represent whether electric current was there or not. And we have only discussed electric current yet via copper wire. So let us stick to that one for now. And nowadays, let us say when electric current is not there, then let that be a 0 or be represented by a 0. And if electric current is there, then let that be represented by a 1. And this is how we can see this in this code here. Every character, every number, and every letter from A to Z in small capitals and in uppercase as well as symbols as well, have its own unique format of ones and zeros, of electric current there or not there, by which they get communicated. And of course, each one must always be unique, of course. Otherwise there would be duplication and the other end would then not know, is it this letter or this letter? So of course they must always be unique. And we see here that each character is always communicated in this code, which is better known as the ASCII code. And in this code, every character is communicated in a unit of 8. And each 0 and 1 is considered to be 1 bit. So 0 is electric current not there, 1 is electric current there, to stick with electric current. And 8 bits are 1 byte, 1024 bytes are 1 kilobyte, 1024 kilobytes are 1 megabyte, and so on and so on. The measurements that we are most likely familiar with from real life. And how many unique characters can we communicate? Can we assign a certain code of zeros and ones to if we are communicating with a unit of 8? Let us find this out by making our own code now. Let's make our own code only consisting of 2 bits, meaning 2 times 1 or 0, 2 times electric current there or not there. So for example, 2 bits, so it's 1, 1, and it must always be unique, of course. So if there is electric current being sent through the copper wire 2 times, then this, for example, shall represent the letter A. Then how many more options do we have if we are communicating only with 2 bits? Of course, they must always be unique, so we have the option 0, 0 to communicate, to assign a character to that format. Then we have 0, 1 and 1, 0, that's it. So we are limited to 4 characters that we can communicate. 4 characters that ultimately then have its unique format of electric current assigned to. So this could, for example, be the letter B, then letter C and letter D, but that's it. So we are limited to a number of 4. So what we need to do makes sense, I guess, or it's obvious that we just need to add more bits then in order to communicate. And with 2 bits, we have 4 options. To 4 characters, we can communicate uniquely. And when we add another bit, meaning then we have the option 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, and 4 more options, which I'm missing now. So 1, 1, 1 is another option that we have. So ultimately, to cut it short, with 3 bits, we have 8 options. And then with 4 bits, we have 16. It always doubles. And then 32, 64, 128. And with 8 bits, when we have a code with 8 bits, we have 256 unique options that we can assign to a character. So meaning ultimately we can communicate 256 unique characters, which is not enough. Because we know that there are Russian characters, there are Asian characters, there are Spanish characters, there are many other characters. And 256 is not sufficient. So the ASCII code is only used when we are communicating with A through Z. So with Latin characters. That is what it's known for, A through Z. But whenever we have a certain character, such as Russian characters, etc., then what people did, they just extended the code, they added more bits. And instead of adding just 1 bit, they immediately, it's a common way to straight away add an entire byte, for example. And this certain special character that is used in, for example, the German-speaking countries, that one is communicated then with 2 bytes, even with 16 bits. And this code that consists not only of the fundamental ASCII characters, the Latin characters A through Z, that's the ASCII code, but the extended code, the extended version basically, is the universal code, which includes any character that we pretty much can think of. Any character there around that exists on this earth has its own unique electric current format by which it gets communicated. Its own unique format of ones and zeros. And that's the Unicode, universal code, which is used usually nowadays, in particular when we are making a website that consists of those special characters. Now let us go for a real example now, having our World Wide Web example. World Wide Web is the communication between computers. One needs the code, the other one has the code. So let's go to a website, for example, in the Philippines. And we have a website in the Philippines, just assume it for website xyz.ph. And let's assume we are this person here in Eastern Europe. And we are entering the address website xyz.ph, and then we are contacting this computer. Hey, give me the code. Code comes back. Our browser reads the code and then displays whatever code comes back. The code determines what the browser will display. And let's assume that on this website, let me write some code here. So let's assume this website only consists of a button. So this code we are making use of next week, it's HTML code. And whenever the browser reads this angle bracket, then it knows, oh, now I need to display something on the screen. And then the instruction comes in here what it shall display, the browser. It shall display a button on the website. So as soon as I hit enter now, this code came back from the Philippines to my location. And the only code that came back was this button here. And then the browser displayed the button. And each character, of course, it came back. For example, let's stick with copper wire through which electric current is sent through. So the only thing that needed to be done is to send the electric current format for this symbol through, then for the letter B, for the letter U, for the letter T, O, N ultimately, and then for that symbol. And each symbol has its own, or each character has its own unique format by which it gets communicated through, for example, copper wire. And so this is how communication of any character is absolutely possible, as we have just seen. Now let's go into colors. And any colors can be communicated as well, because colors, not any color has a name. For example, orange, red, they have names as well, and some other colors as well. But usually to get really any color as we want, there are codes out there. Codes that have really any color. And each code represents one color. For example, in the hex code, which we get used to over the coming weeks, represents the color white as # symbol followed by 6 Fs. And therefore we can communicate colors definitely as well. Whether we use the code or the name doesn't matter, but each code and each name just consists of characters, nothing else. So all we need to do, we need to communicate the characters. Each of them has its own unique format of electric current. So for example, the color white is communicated with this format, and then 6 times F is sent through the copper wire. And on the other end, that comes out, and the other end, of course, must be familiar with that code. And the browser is definitely familiar with that code. It knows, aha, this is the color white. I have now received the color white. For example, color black would be # symbol 6 times 0 would be the color black. So this is just a code. And each image, as we know, is made up of a lot of pixels. So if we zoom in here at the ear of the deer, we see those pixels, and each pixel is just a color. Each color has its code or its color name, and a name or a code just consists of characters. And each character has its own unique format by which it gets communicated. Therefore, we can also communicate images. And each video, as we may know, only consists of a lot of images shown very quickly, one after the other, giving us the illusion of motion. And because videos ultimately only consist of images, therefore we can also communicate videos as well. The only thing that we are left now with is voice, or tones, audio in general, because videos, of course, also have audio included. And this is the last piece that we want to get a feeling towards, which is, I guess, a little bit more difficult than the current thing that we have discussed so far. But yet still, all we want is a feeling that things are possible, that we are not living in this black box the entire time. How is it possible? Just to have a feeling towards that image that we are working on. And let's go into sound in general, audio, it's based on vibrations. So whenever we pull a string on this cello, for example, or a violin, or when we punch a table, or whenever we hear a noise, whatever it is, when we hear a noise from a person, a voice, when we hear a voice, it's all based on vibrations. So with our lungs and our tongue, whatever is involved in the human body there, we are causing vibrations. And those vibrations are then traveling through the air. It's kind of a domino effect. So those vibrations are traveling along, vibrating one part of air, then the next part, next part, next part. So kind of a domino effect, ultimately making that person that is here hearing those sounds. And it all depends how things are vibrating. So when I say A or U, it's a complete different vibration that I'm causing, that is my mouth and everything that's involved there is causing. And therefore that will ultimately cause the air to vibrate differently. And it's vibrating that air differently, that air ultimately reaching here. And that person, his ear will also vibrate, something in his ears will also vibrate. And ultimately, depending on how things are vibrating in his ear, this is the sound his brain, his or her brain will ultimately then perceive. And this, how things are vibrating, can always be represented as a wave. So for example, let's go into the musical note A. So the vibration, when we play the musical note A, let me just play it for a second. The musical note A. So right now, your speakers, you can hear that sound. So your speakers were vibrating at a certain level, to a certain extent. And that vibration travels then through the air to your ears, something in your ear is vibrating. And depending how things are vibrating, that is then perceived by your brain as that and that sound. And that tone has the frequency, meaning how things are vibrating, which can be represented as a wave. And the frequency just means how close those waves are together. That's all it means, how close the air is vibrating, ultimately. And at a frequency of 440, whatever hertz is, it doesn't matter for now. It's just the measurement used. At that frequency, if our ears perceive that vibration that has this waveform, this frequency, then our brain perceives the musical note A on one pitch, of course. It exists on several pitches, octaves, of course. And then the musical note C, for example, on one pitch is the frequency, wave frequency, how close these waves are together, how things are vibrating, how closely. That's 523. So this is how every tone has its own frequency, how things are vibrating, which can be represented as a wave. And now is the question, so everything is just vibration, nothing else. So now is the question, how can we get this vibration, how can we get voice, for example, from one location over, let's stick again with copper wire, over to another location. So all we have here is a black box, nothing else. What does this black box need to be able to do in order that the voice will ultimately be sent via electric current, by electric current over copper wire to a remote, to a distant location? So of course this black box, whatever it is, just needs to be able to, first of all, detect these waves, so these vibrations. And depending on how things are vibrating, this is how much electric current will be put onto the wire. And depending on how much electric current is coming in on the other end, this is how much something will be vibrating again, and vibration causes the air to vibrate, and ultimately this is giving them the sound here, again, exactly the same sound that was inserted here, or the same voice. So ultimately what we have on the wire is actually the exact same wave that is inserted here. So depending on how things are vibrating, this is how much electric current will be put onto the wire. So ultimately maybe more, less, more. So ultimately this electric current that is there is already representing this wave here. And what we had before, when we communicated the characters, we always communicated either ones and zeros, meaning electric current there or not. So it was all digital. digits, ones and zeros. And now we have electric current, more, less. So it's not there or not there. It's more there, it's more there, less there. This is analog and not digital anymore. And computers, they compute ones and zeros, compute digits, nothing else, ones and zeros. And they cannot work with an analog signal. They cannot work with it. They need ones and zeros. So ultimately, things need to be mapped again. Pretty similar to colors, what we did with the color code. So we know that the musical note A on a certain pitch has a vibration type or a frequency of 440. And let's just assign this tone a code that consists of ones and zeros again. So for example, 0, 1, 0 shall represent this vibration, this frequency. And then we make up our own code again. So things can be transformed from analog to digits, to ones and zeros ultimately. And this transformation, or the jargon word, is modularizing things or demodularizing, depending which way we do it, from analog to digital or the other way around. So modulize, demodulize, mod, demod, modem. This is what the modem does, a device that we most likely have heard of already, that is built into computers, routers, and many other devices as well. So ultimately, if we enter a website, and that website by accident is again in Australia, that has the code here, this web server has the code for that website. So hey, give me the code, and that website has maybe a video with voice. So this is how we ultimately then get this video, including the voice, back. Video is just images, and voice ultimately are transformed in ones and zeros as well. So what we have now, text, we can communicate any text, which are just characters, which each character has its own unique format of electric current, either being there or not there, either a 1 or a 0, and we can communicate any colors, any images, videos, and sound, as we just saw. The only signal type that we have yet used is electric current, though, via copper wire. It's still great, heavily in use, but usually for short distances, that we communicate with electric current via copper wire. Nowadays, the long distances usually use light. So as we can see, these cables that connect the oceans here, these cables nowadays, they do not have copper wire in them anymore. Instead, they have thin glass pipes through which light is sent through. And light, it's either light or it's dark. So it's based on the same two options. Electric current is there or it's not there. It's 1 or 0. It's light, dark, yes, no, true, false. Only two options. So this communication basis has not changed, just the technology. And light travels faster around this earth than does electric current by copper wire. Therefore, this technology that uses light, better known as fiber optics, has pretty much replaced copper wire over long distances, at least. For short distances, electric current is still in use, and for other things as well. So now we have another technology. And our final technology to signal something is now wireless, to understand this type of communication and to give us a feeling towards, yes, all we want is okay, that's all we want today, nothing else, a feeling, okay, makes somehow sense, okay, that's cool, that's somehow. And that is, now again, we are going into waves now. But now we are talking about different waves. Waves that are not based on vibration, and they are not traveling through a medium such as air. So with voice, what we said before, voice is traveling through the air, for example. Can also be water, doesn't matter. A medium, it needs something to travel, like a domino effect. And now the waves that we are talking about, better known as electromagnetic waves, which doesn't necessarily need to concern us, this jargon word. The point here is that lights are just waves as well, but a different kind of wave. They are not based on vibration, and they do not need a medium to travel, such as air. They just travel in emptiness as well. As for example, when we take a look at the stars, and when a star would explode, for example, and even though it was physically so loud, this explosion, that we should hear it on this earth, we would not hear it, because in space there is no air, it's empty, it's emptiness. And therefore we wouldn't hear it, but nevertheless we could see the explosion, because light doesn't need any air to travel. It's a different kind of wave, and the wave also looks a little bit different without going into detail here. But light, again, it's based on frequency. So if those other waves here, electromagnetic waves, if they have a certain frequency, then we perceive those waves as light. So we don't see the waves then, but we see the light then. So at a certain frequency, when those waves, how close those waves are together. And then the further those waves are together, the further we go in this direction, the more harmful they become to us in terms of cancer, etc. And the further down we go in this direction, the less harmful they are. So radio waves are not harmful because they are everywhere. If we look outside of our window, even though we cannot see those waves, they are everywhere because we can receive those radio stations. We just need to turn on the radio and we receive the voice that is traveling through the air by using such waves that have a far wider, that are far wider apart. The frequency is lower here. So this is how wireless gets communicated as well. So same as radio in the radio spectrum. So let's take a look at this communication with wireless. Now we saw the capital letter Y before in the ASCII code, which consisted of all the letters A through Z, all the Latin characters. And that one has the code in the ASCII code 0, 1, 0, etc. So electric current not there, or it's dark, then electric current there, or it's light, and so on. And that is the capital letter Y. And this one can always be transformed by a modem again into its analog type. And here there are different options even how to transform this, how to modulize it, or how to modulize it. Doesn't matter the options, but it's absolutely possible. Now how can something, a device, now take this data and then boost it as waves into the air, let it oscillate into the air, boost it out. And this device is better known as the antenna, a device we absolutely are familiar with. This is just the technical symbol for it, but the antenna here, let's go for an example. This satellite dish has an antenna, the satellite in space has an antenna, so we can communicate the letter Y as waves, as electromagnetic waves. And electromagnetic waves, they travel at the speed of light, and they can travel to infinity, so they can definitely reach a satellite in space as well. And then on the other end we may send it down again to another satellite dish here. So this is how one antenna that we know of. Now let's go for another antenna, another device that has an antenna. Nowadays the antenna is not really visible anymore in our mobile phones, not as it used to be back in the days, but also our mobile phones have at least one antenna, and they therefore also can boost these waves out, let these waves travel away, and then they are received by, for example, a cell tower wherever we are. Or for example, if we are connected wirelessly with our laptop has an antenna as well, it can boost those waves out, and then for example, a hotspot somewhere, a router for example that is close to us, receives these waves as well. So this is the last signal type that we wanted to discuss, to have a little bit of feeling towards how data can be communicated without going into much detail into chemistry or physics here. And just to get a feeling, that's all we wanted today. And now to sum it up, let's do once again the example with the IMDb website. Let me enter it once again, imdb.com, and let me hit enter. The wheel starts to turn, and I'm this person. I'm sitting right here in Eastern Europe somewhere, and I just hit enter for the IMDb website, and I'm wirelessly connected. And this is my router. So first of all, my laptop boosts those waves out. My request, hey, give me the code, boosts it out. and then it takes the cable route, maybe copper wire with electric current, maybe light by fiber optics, then it reaches the cell, the satellite dish here, then maybe that communication goes on over the air to the satellite, then comes down to the next satellite, and then ultimately reaches Seattle, hey, give me the code, and then same way the code comes back to my location. My computer, my browser can read the code and then display the website. Now the communication is usually by cable, but nevertheless it's also possible by satellites. So all we want is a feeling. I hope it did not confuse any of us. The goal was a feeling, nothing else, that we are not living in this black box. Why, what, how, that we know, at least have a feeling towards how things are going on. And now comes our actual job, the languages itself. We will be writing code, we are the web developers, and because every website just consists of code, and therefore that's gonna be our job. And now let's take a look how the languages are divided up, which language is in charge of what things. And our first two languages that we will be starting to learn from next week onwards will be HTML and CSS. With HTML, if we write code in that language and then give it to the browser to read, then the browser will display the content of the website. If we write code in the CSS language, and then whatever that means, hypertext markup language, cascading style sheets, doesn't matter. If we write code in that language and give it to the browser, and then the browser will apply the appearance to the content. So this code is in charge of content, this one, the appearance of the content. Let's stick with our IMDb website to go over this division, what the content is and the appearance. So the content of a website, let's take a look. What do we have here? We have an image here, we have videos, we have an input field, drop-down menu here, a button here. These are links, here are images, these are links, here we have text. This is text here as well. So it's pretty much always the same, whichever website we visit. It's nothing new to us. This is the content of a website. What we might be less familiar with is that this content is always contained inside container boxes. And those container boxes, they provide the structure of a website. And therefore, next week we will be starting to a great extent, we will be working with those container boxes, because they just provide the structure. And once we have the structure, so therefore the fundamental part of our website, then we just need to fill these container boxes with whatever we want within them, with whatever content we want to have contained within these container boxes, such as images, the things we have marked before. So this is the content of a website. And this is what we can achieve when we write code in the HTML language and then give it to the browser, and the browser will then display that content. Let me remove that CSS, the other language that is in charge of the appearance of the content. And then we can see a clear division, how things are divided up, what the content is and what the appearance of that content is. So what I'm doing now, I'm taking the CSS code away from the browser. Hey, you shall not read it now. You shall only read the HTML code. And this is what it does. It only has now the HTML code to read, and it displayed whatever the HTML code said. And we saw HTML code already. For example, the button, then later we will see that this, for example, will be the code to indicate to the browser, hey, make me a container box. And this is HTML, and this is what we ultimately achieve to create our content. Our content is still here. Our input field, the links are still here, the images and videos are still here, the entire content is still here. Also, the container boxes are here as well. The only thing that we cannot really see those container boxes is because they lost their color. And that is what the appearance is in charge of. It's in charge of all these stylistic things, such as colors. All the colors are gone, shadows, borders, all these stylistic things. But it's also in charge, this language is also in charge of how the content shall be positioned. As we see here, it's completely messed up, the content now, completely somewhere else as before, because it's the CSS language. That code that the browser needs to read in order to apply the positioning as well. Not only stylistic things, but positioning, and also everything that relates to dimensions. We can see that this input field here, it has a different dimension as before, because it's also that language, that code that we need to write and then give to the browser. And then it will apply in general as main category. It's the appearance, dimensions, positioning, and styling. That's what this language does. And those two languages, as we will see, once I give the browser that CSS code back to that website, we already have a fully complete website. And not only this one, any other website is already created with HTML and CSS with those two languages. They are the fundamental part of any website, and therefore we will be starting with those two languages. Why would we need any other language if those two languages already create the website that we want? And that's where we go into JavaScript now. What does JavaScript do? Our third language that we will be learning in this course. And what this language does, or at least what we will be using it for in this course, is that we will be changing the content and the appearance of the content at any time, whenever we want to, at milliseconds, seconds, when the page is loaded already. And we can change it also in reaction to some event that happens on the website. As for example, the person that visits this website does something with his mouse, for example, going over here. Then new content is coming up, so we have just changed the content. Again, once the mouse goes over here, the content changes. New content is coming up. Or for example, the mouse does not only need to go over somewhere or it clicks somewhere. New content is showing up underneath then. So this is what JavaScript can do. And in this course, we will be using JavaScript to change the content and the appearance of the content whenever something happens, such as a mouse doing something. These are events, or when the browser window gets resized, then change something. So based on events, whatever it is, when this and this happens, then do that and that. This is what JavaScript can do. It can change the content and the appearance in reaction to some event, and also over time whenever we want to. Let's go for a little bit of more event examples. So I'm now pressing the keyboard key P on that website, and the game pauses. I'm pressing the arrow keys on my keyboard, going down, going left, going down. So these are events. When that keyboard key gets pressed, then do something. That is JavaScript. Events. When that and that, then that and that. Then this website here is made up of images, a lot of images. The Pac-Man here, the yellow one, is an image. All these white dots are images. The borders are individual images. And the ghosts are images as well. And whenever one image touches the other, then something is happening. So when the Pac-Man touches the Pac-Man image, which is just an image, touches that white dot image, then that image disappears. So when that happens, then change the content. Let an image disappear. Image is part of the content. So these are events. When something happens, then do that, change content or the appearance of the content. And those ghosts here, they are moving over time. And so this is over time as well. Things we can do over time, after milliseconds, every few milliseconds a little bit, giving us the illusion of motion. This is JavaScript, and that's where we are into programming, because that's where the logic starts. HTML and CSS are not programming languages, JavaScript is. This is where we really have logic in there, over time things, in reaction to something. That's where our third language that we will be going over in this course. And yet we are not done. But before we go to 2 more languages, let's discuss actually those 3 languages once again with our good example IMDb. I hit enter, wheel starts to turn. I'm this guy now in Western Asia somewhere. I hit enter. What happens? I'm contacting the IMDb server. Hey, give me the code. Code comes back. My browser reads the code and displays the website. And what code did come back? The HTML code came back. The browser read that code and could display the content of the website. The CSS code came back and the browser could apply the appearance to the content. And the JavaScript code came back and the browser can then do those changes to the appearance and to the content and the appearance of the content, either over time whenever we want to, it's determined by that code here, JavaScript code then, or in reaction to some event that happens, a mouse doing something, a keyboard key gets pressed, etc. 2 events. So these 3 languages, the code of these 3 languages is read by the browser. And therefore these languages are browser languages, or in its perfect jargon word, they are client-side languages, because the browser is installed on the person, the client, the person that uses it. He is the client, the visitor of the website. So in perfect, these are client-side languages. And we do not have nowadays, at least we do not have any alternatives. We use HTML, CSS and JavaScript. These are the languages we will go for and have to go for. And now let's go for 2 more languages. Languages that are not read by the browser. Let me go to the registration page of this IMDb website. And here we can see registration. One, as usual, we need to fill something out, first name, etc. And after we have done so, we hit the register button. And then what happens? Now this entire data that we have filled out here, first name, last name, etc., will then be sent over to Seattle, to that server, and there is a language such as PHP. Now here we have options, alternatives as well. The language taught in this course is PHP 7. And that language, such a language can take that data, it can take it and it can work with it. It can make sure that everything is secure. It can work with it in many ways, and usually it passes it on to a database. A database is just tables. Tables, nothing else, as we know tables. With rows, columns, this is a database. And here we have multiple alternatives as well. The one used in this course is MySQL. And what happens? It passes that data on, such as first name, last name, etc. And then the person that registered then receives a row in the table with his first name being stored there, last name, his gender, etc. And then up on that, PHP decides what code to send back, what HTML code, CSS code, etc. depending whether the registration was successful. If it wasn't, for example, then the code came back, for example, hey, just some text came back, HTML, some content came back. Hey, you missed something to fill out, or please, your password must be between 6 and 12 characters long, or etc. Here it even says it, 8 characters minimum. Something comes back, that's what PHP decides, but what does come back is always HTML, CSS and JavaScript, because these 3 languages are the ones that the browser is able to read. So PHP is not coming back. PHP is the one living on the server. It does his job here. It doesn't come back. It does his job right here, together usually with a database. So these 2 languages are server languages. Let us go one more example. Now we have registered on this website, so let us do the login as well. For logging in, we need to insert the email address and the password, and then ultimately we hit the login button. And as soon as we do so, again, we are sending data to Seattle, and this time it is the email address and the password. And then PHP takes that data and asks the database, hey, do you have a row in your table that with that email and that password? And then the database says yes or no, and PHP ultimately, for example, the database says yes, that person exists. Then PHP decides, let's send back, for example, the HTML, CSS and JavaScript code for the user area, for the personal user page of that person that just logged in. So meaning ultimately, as soon as we then hit login, then we are redirected to my user area, and my browser then can read the HTML, CSS and JavaScript code that ultimately make up the user area, and the user area will be presented here, the page, the website page. So these 2 languages are there to retrieve, process and store data. These are server-side languages, and this is only one major part that languages such as these 2 that live on the server can do. One other major part is to create dynamic content. Content, that word we have already seen because it's It's HTML, with which language we write code, give it to the browser, and the browser will create the content. And with those languages, we can create dynamic content. Meaning, right now, if we wouldn't use such languages to create, for example, this IMDb website, then we would need to build millions of pages, because this page includes many actors and actresses, so many pages. As for example, this person here and many other actors. This is now the subpage for this person, and there are many subpages for each actor. Each movie has its own subpage, and if we wouldn't make use of those two languages, then we would have to write millions of pages, which is of course insane. Nobody would ever do this. So if we are creating a big website, we have to use those languages such as those ones to create dynamic content, because with that we only make one single HTML file. And we know HTML consists of all these boxes. Let me just mark once again. So when we write code in HTML, we can create boxes. And they are actually not only container boxes, but other boxes as well. A website consists of so many boxes, as we will see. So here, box. So we create one file with that box, and then we fill these boxes with the data for each actor, because each actor is using exactly the same boxes, the same layout. The boxes provide the structure, the layout. Now this person here, his images here, his name, his bio, his images are underneath. Let me go to another actor or actress. Let's go to an actress, and again, here is her image, here is her name, her bio, her images. They use the same boxes, the same layout. The only difference is now we are using one single file with the boxes, and then we push the entire data in it, depending on which actor it is. So let's go for a real example. This actress here, for example, has a number in the address up here, and that number only belongs to here, to that actress here. Let me now go to another actor, and we can see it once again. So here is another number. It only belongs, that number only belongs to that person, this number. So what happens? Let's go into an example here, and we only want a feeling. Once we get to the topic, we have it anyway. So let me hit enter. Wheel starts to turn. What happens? I'm contacting the server in Seattle again, the IMDb server. Hey, give me the code for the website imdb.com/name/nm, and now it comes this number. So what happens on the server? PHP takes that request and then asks the database, hey, give me everything you have in the database to the number 0503567, and then the entire data, including his text, his name, what he does, his images that should be used on the page are coming back. Not the images itself, but which of them should be used. And then they come back, and then PHP takes this one single HTML file and just fills the boxes with the entire data that is coming back from the database. So this dynamic content, a very powerful thing, only requires us to make one single file, HTML, one single content file, and that one can be used over and over again. And that is just one a great example. That was a great example of dynamic content. But there are other things involved in dynamic content, as we will see later. But it's very powerful to use languages such as PHP and MySQL that we will be learning in this course as well. Of course, we will be starting with HTML. Which code we use? We write code in HTML, give it to the browser creates the content. CSS, to sum it up now, CSS, we write code in that language, give it to the browser then applies the appearance to the content. We write code in JavaScript, give it to the browser, and the browser can do those dynamic changes to the content and the appearance at any time, or to some event such as a mouse doing something, a keyboard key gets pressed, etc. This is JavaScript, and these three languages, the code for them are read by the browser, and therefore they are browser languages, or client-side languages, the actual perfect word for it, because the browser is owned by the client, the visitor of the website. And then we have the two server-side languages, PHP and MySQL. PHP is one of those languages that can retrieve process data and then pass it on to the database, and it can also, together with the database, create dynamic content. So this is it. These are the languages. This is how things are approximately divided up among the languages that we will be learning. And now finally, we will do the download and the installation of some necessary software. And it should be clear by now, what software do we need? What is our job? Our job is to write code. Therefore, of course, we need a software in which we can write the code in an environment, a software in which we write the code in. And the one used in this course is NetBeans. It is a sophisticated software, a smart one that auto-completes us things, meaning as soon as we start typing, we can auto-complete things from that list. It speeds us up a lot, and it also provides us often some code that we would need to write, which we always need, but which we always use, some code structures. But NetBeans provides us that those code structures already, so we don't need to write them anymore. Also, it uses nice colors, and it always knows when we are doing errors. It's a smart one, and as far as I know, it's the only one that is on that level, on that smart level, that is for free, and therefore we will be using NetBeans in this course. NetBeans, however, requires also the installation of Java, so we need to install two things here. First, we need to install Java, at least the development kit, that's what it's called, and that is the precondition to install NetBeans. It requires Java. So we are downloading actually here two things. So first of all, Java. The links, of course, are always in the description underneath the video or in the notes itself. That can be found as mentioned on this website here. So in here, what we need to do to download Java, first of all, so accept the license agreement, and then depending on what operating system we have, what operating system. So when we have a Macintosh computer, then it's this one here. And then for Windows, it depends. So whether we have a computer that is able to process 32 ones and zeros, 32 bits at a given point in time, or 64. And we can find that out when we click on the computer. Right click on it, and then the last option says properties. And right in here, it gives us the information whether we have a 64 or a 32-bit operating system. And depending on that answer that we have received, so 64 is this one, the 32 will be this one. And once we click it, the download starts, or should start immediately. And then let's go for NetBeans, our software in which we write the code in. Whether we want to subscribe to the newsletter, first of all, then the language we want that software to be in, and again, which platform we have, whether we have a Macintosh, a Windows, a Linux operating system, depends. And then it's the PHP. So always the one we need, ultimately we need the languages HTML5, JavaScript, and PHP. Because that one in actual fact confused me a little bit, because they are 2 times the same ones, they have the same size. But those two we need, HTML5, JavaScript, and PHP. Wherever those 2 dots ultimately are, why ever they have them twice, I'm not sure why. And then download this one. When we have 64 again, that's Windows, and that's 32 for Windows. So I'm right now here Windows, and otherwise we change it. Just Mac only has one option, which would be this one. And this is then, so we have downloaded now these 2 softwares. So then what else do we need? I mean, our job is to write code, but what's our playground? What's the environment in which we are working in? Everything we do falls in the image of the World Wide Web, the communication between browsers and web servers. One needs the code, the other one has the code. And the one that needs the code is the web browser, the one that we nevertheless have already installed on our computer. Otherwise, we couldn't watch this video right now. The brand used in this course is Firefox, which I would recommend to also download, even though I will not go over the download and the installation process now. But there are minor differences still nowadays in between the browsers, so we are on the same page. And therefore I would recommend to also download the Firefox software. And ultimately what we need is a server, of course. But we only know the server so far from being at a distant location from which everybody around this world, any web browser can contact that one. The difference now is this is a public web server. What we will be downloading is a local web server. So not this communication happens to a distant location. Hey, give me the code comes back. Instead, exactly the same procedure will ultimately happen. The only difference, it will happen on our own computer because we have the browser on our own computer and also a local web server that we will be using to develop websites. Until we are finished and want to go live, then we need one of those public ones. But we will be downloading a local web server. And then same procedure. When our browser enters an address, then we will be using not www anymore, www something, because we don't know, we don't own a domain name yet, and we don't have a public server. So what we will be doing is entering a local host, our local web server that hosts our website, and then the website name that we have given to our website. So this is what we will ultimately be doing, and then we are contacting our local web server that is also installed on our computer. That one will hand out the code, comes back to our web browser inside. So electric current or some kind of energy is flowing inside our computer then in the same way. The only difference, it's now on our computer and not to a remote location anymore. So let's download this local web server. And what we actually do now is we will be downloading an entire package, because we have seen that there are two languages, MySQL and PHP, that we will be learning in this week, in this course, that are living on the server. So they are also software installed on the server. So we install now MySQL, PHP, and the server whose name is Apache all together, so we don't need to download anything separately. And once again, here is for Windows, and important is that because we are learning PHP 7, so the latest link here, the PHP 7 link for Windows, same for Linux and for Macintosh, always the version 7 one. So this is done then. This was the download and the installation. The download and the installation process. Let us now, the download process, let us now go into the installation process. And let me therefore for a second remove here or get things a little bit. Quarter left to top and this one. So let's go into downloads. What do we have here? Right now we have NetBeans that we have downloaded, but that one, before we can install it, we first need to install Java, because NetBeans depends on Java. So once we double click Java first, then first of all Java 1, this one comes up. Welcome. So here we just click next. Then development tools should be selected. Then install to, it should be fine. Programming files should be fine. Next, and that's it already. Then what else do we have? NetBeans, now our actual software which we need, in which we write the code in. So this one comes up as soon as we double click next, accept the terms, next, and then where it shall install to. Sometimes it happens that there is another field where it asks, where is Java? And there we need to say, hey, our Java we have installed right here. But usually it detects it automatically, so we will not find another field here, just in case I'm mentioning. Otherwise, next, all fine. Whether we want to check for updates automatically, and this is it. Then let's go for XAMPP. Let me go for XAMPP. So this will be the XAMPP installation window. As soon as we hit the XAMPP installation, then this one comes up. And when there is a message coming up that your antivirus system is preventing the installation, then the antivirus system must be turned off, at least only, of course, for the short period of time during the installation. And then it's next. Right here, what we don't need is Tomcat. We don't need Webalizer. We don't need either. And yeah, the rest is okay, I would say, for now. At least the rest is fine. But Tomcat and Webalizer, we can remove the tick, at least for this course. We won't be making use of it. Then next, and here it is important to install the XAMPP at the very root of the computer. So in Windows it's usually C, then Macintosh depends how we name our computer, but at the very root, that's where it should be installed, at the computer level. And then next, and then this window comes up, and here is a tick already. We don't need it in this course, so for this course at least we don't need to have a tick here. And then this should be it. Yep, this is it. So then the installation should be done, and when XAMPP, yep, finally when XAMPP, the installation is complete, then this one comes up. Do you want to start the control panel straight away? Yes, there we click yes, we want to. This is, yes, we want to do that. And now let's go into our let's go into the actual usage of it. Now, the only thing that we now want to sum it up, to finish it up, we want something to get something on the screen. That's it. And these are the windows that we have now. So usually discard. So this one comes up with a start page. So this one we can remove as soon as we have opened NetBeans. This one we can remove. That's fine. That's just an example that I used already. And then concerning our browser, let's go into a new tab. So that's our browser window. That's our window in which we write the code in. That's the browser that reads the code. And here we have the web server that can hand out the code. It has the code and can hand it out. And we installed it right at the root of the computer at C. And here we received now this folder XAMPP, and right in here there is another folder htdocs. And in here is the music for us for a long time, and most of these folders we don't even go over. They are not relevant to us. htdocs, in here we create our websites. And all this means is we create a folder, and that one will then be the website. It will represent the website. So let me call my folder WD216, Web Developer 216, and we can name it whatever we want to. And we can create as many websites as we want to, so as many folders. So that will be my website. And in here must be the code for the website, because then we will be contacting the local web server who hosts our website and tell him, hey, give me the code that is inside WD216. And then we hit enter, and then the communication starts. Hey, give me the code. The web server looks in here, and then code comes back. However, we don't have any code yet in there, and whenever we write code for our website, this shall of course always be stored in here straight away then. So this is where it should be. So what we will do now is we will new project, and then we go for HTML5 JavaScript. HTML we are starting with HTML5 JavaScript with existing sources. The existing source is just the folder that we have created, nothing else. So there we go for existing sources, and then we click next, and then we browse for our folder, and that's it. Open it, finish, and now that folder is loaded in here. And that's indicated by this NB project. So this is the hint for the software. I must have loaded this one in here. I must have loaded this website in here. So that one we should not remove. As soon as we delete this one, then here it will be deleted as well. So should we ever delete it by accident, for example, then we just need to, in here, we just need to open the project again here. So not new project, but open. And in here, now let's create code. What language do we start with? With content, of course, with HTML code. So let's create an HTML file, and let's name it index. Because that file will be returned, or the content in that file with that name index will be returned to the web browser by default. The file, the content with the file name index, the HTML file with the name index. And here NetBeans gives us beautiful code here already, which we will use, which we need to use, but for now let us just remove it. This is the homepage to our first website. And now let me hit enter, localhost WD216, and as soon as I hit enter, it will already work. Perfect. But I actually didn't want it to work because I have already turned it on. That's why we have this control panel here. It must always be turned on. Otherwise, as soon as we hit enter, it will not work. Usually, wherever it just worked. Our web server always needs to be on, and this is why we have this control panel. And the name of our web server, the web server that hands the code out, here it must be started. It must always be turned on. When we turn our computer off, this one turns off as well. So we always need to turn it on as well. So once we hit start here, everything is fine. And if we receive any problems here, then please take a look which link I have already in the description below as well, and in the notes and in the underneath the video in the description as well. Please take a look at this website. It's very straightforward how things are done. So if that one shouldn't turn on, then I would suggest it's this website here where there is the answer. I would first go for the second answer here, this one. Because some things need to change then, right here. Here you need to then go to config and 2 different files. Here something needs to be changed, but it's very clearly indicated and described here. I hope nothing needs to be changed, but if that is the case, a link is underneath the video or in the notes. And this is it. Now this is where we will be taking then off next week. We will be starting to code. Once again, we have this control panel only to start our server. Then we can get rid of it. That's it. Here we have our software in which we write the code in. That code gets immediately stored into the folder on the server where it should be. And whenever we enter then the address, hey, give me the code, local web server who hosts my website, among which is the WD216 website. Give me the code to that website. Web server returns whatever is inside the index.html file. And then the browser displays whatever came back, which is currently just this text. And next week we start coding in HTML and CSS.